So, welcome to the Littleton Board of Health meeting for Wednesday, January 27th. It's a virtual meeting on Zoom. Due to Zoom rules, the town of Littleton began conducting remote participation / Zoom meetings pursuant to Governor Baker's emergency order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law on March 19th, 2020. Since that time, unanticipated legal concerns related to the open meeting law have been brought to our attention by the town clerk. Those concerns are supported by the Attorney General's office and confirmed by town council. One concern is that the chat function allows a parallel text conversation to the board's public meeting. Chat is essentially running commentary that is occurring, but is not moderated or followed by the chair. All participants and listeners may not be aware of the comments being made because some meeting participants join by phone and do not see these conversations. Another concern is conversations between residents within the chat room, which are not incorporated in a public record. In response to these concerns, the town will implement the following changes, which in no way prohibit any member of the public from participating in discussion and sharing information during the public meeting, and will ensure that all listeners and participants have equal access to this meeting. People that join the Zoom meeting are set so their microphones are muted. If you call in by phone, please use *6 to mute or unmute your phone. So that the meeting can occur in an orderly fashion, we ask that people who join keep their microphones on mute so background noises do not interfere with the meeting. If you wish to participate in the meeting, please use the raise your hand function available on Zoom. And if you call in by phone, dial *9, which will activate the raise your hand function. The meeting host will notify the chairperson of raised hands, and the chairperson will determine whether and when to allow public comment. When called upon, participants should unmute and state their name and address, and after speaking, we request that participant return their microphones back to mute. Just want to let you guys know that Janet is out of work for a little while, so she won't be at our meeting tonight. And I guess if we need anything, Ed Mullen said that we should contact him. So, okay. Just Jim texting me that he can't get by the computer, so he's going to be on the phone, Dave. So I guess the first on our agenda right now is discussion of the library reopening with Sam Alvarez. So Sam's here tonight, and Sam.
Excuse me a second, Lisa. Do you know Jim's phone number? Because we have a phone in person.
I don't know. I know his. Let me see. I don't know which phone he's calling from. So.
Okay.
What phone he's calling from. So if you want to let them in and then see if it's him.
Hello.
Is that you, Jim?
This is Jim. Yep, that's me. Yep.
Awesome.
So.
All right. Let me.
Jim. Hi, Jim.
Hi. How are you?
Good.
Jim, you said you have to get off. Can we do a brief library discussion with Sam Alvarez first? What time do you have to get off, Jim?
About 10 minutes of 8.
Okay. All right. Great. And Louise is trying to get in too. So
I just let her in.
Yep. Thanks. All right. So go ahead, Sam. Sorry.
So my name is Sam Alvarez. I'm the library director of the Reuben Hoare Library. Thank you for meeting with me today. I just wanted to get some guidance from the Board of Health about our plans to reopen to the public for browsing. So just for a little background, we've been engaged in curbside pickup and some limited computer appointments since about May, but we have not allowed any of the public in for any browsing or to use the meeting rooms or anything like that. Our current plan is to open to the public by appointment only, 3 days a week, starting on February 9th. The 3 days would be Tuesdays from 3 to 6, Thursdays from 3 to 6, and Saturdays from 10 to 12. So about 2 to 3 hours per day. And we would only allow 6 patrons in per hour by appointment. Patrons would make appointment either online through a scheduling software we're using, or they can call the library and make an appointment that way. And the patrons must make the appointment up to 12 hours before their time they want to come into the library.
Yeah, that before.
They're only allowed to browse the shelves and check out items. They will not be allowed to use the comfy seating or the tables or the meeting spaces. Patrons will be required to wear a mask at all times, of course, and to fill out contact tracing forms. The staff will have plexiglass shields, which have already been purchased around the circulation desk, and patrons will be encouraged to actually use the self-checkout machines instead to limit their contact with the staff. But of course, if they need to use the interact with the staff, they can, but through the plexiglass shields. Patrons will continue to be allowed to use the computers, but again, only on those 3 days during those times. And we will also continue to encourage patrons to engage in curbside pickup, contactless curbside pickup. But of course, if they want to enter the library, they'll have to make an appointment. Just to give you a comparison, at the moment, Concord Library, Acton Library, Harvard Library, Groton Library, and Westford Library are all not allowing patrons into their libraries right now. They're only doing curbside. Groton plans to allow patrons back in on February 8th. Several of these libraries were allowing their patrons in for browsing, but then rolled it back after recent spikes in their towns. So yeah, that's it. That's our plan. We're just looking for guidance from the Board of Health right now to determine our next step.
I have a question.
Yes.
Sure, go ahead, Louise.
Hi, Sam. So one thing that caught me in what you said was that people would be able to use the computers.
Mhm.
And who's going to be wiping those down? The keyboards down?
Staff are wiping them down.
Okay.
They have Clorox wipes,
Okay.
and yeah, they've been using that.
Mike, did you have a question too?
Yeah, I have a question and a comment. My first question is do you have an age limitation on who can be either accompanying a browser
Yeah,
or
that was
browse themselves? In other words, I mean, I'm trying to find out if you're going to allow children into this facility at all.
That's something I forgot to put in my notes. No, we would not allow anyone under 18, only adults.
And the other question is, do you have any, are you open to, if you don't have any, what we call triggers or metrics? I'm not going to attribute anything of great moment happening as a result of what you're describing. I'm just saying there's no guarantee that the current, quote, trend in cases in Littleton, much less anywhere else, are going to continue. In fact, I don't think they will. So I'd like to find out what would cause you and your staff to say, not a good idea anymore. Let's go back to curbside exclusively.
Well, we would look to the Board of Health. We would look to what numbers are in the town.
Wait. What numbers will you use? I mean, just saying numbers doesn't mean much.
Honestly, we don't know right now. That's the honest answer. We're not sure. That's why we would look to Board of Health or the town to give us guidance.
Unless I'm wrong, we're still sitting by the state's criteria in a highly, what we'll call, maybe an exaggeration, but a dangerous, this has been the heightened danger in Littleton because of the number of weeks that we've exceeded the number of positive cases per test.
Right.
Okay. So what I don't quite understand yet is what is it that gives you, and I'm not going to put you totally on the spot, but what stimulated your group to take under consideration, other than mental health issues, which I totally understand, to open up, shall we say, increased public exposure, however limited, at a time of maximum threat?
Well, that's why I'm here right now this isn't set in stone. We're looking for guidance from the Board of Health to find out if this is a good idea or not. We don't know. I don't know. And so right now the trustees we've been working on this plan for months, and every month we decide, no, we're not going to do it. And so right now we're trying to figure out when it would be a good time.
Why don't we see if Jim has any comment on this?
So, Sam, this is Jim Gareffi. I'm the board's agent.
Hello.
Thanks, Jim.
Hi. So I assume the state, the Department of Public Health and the Division of Labor Standards have sector-specific workplace standards for a whole bunch of different activities, libraries being one of them. And I wasn't sure if you had a chance to review that, and that's how you came up with your plan.
Yes, right now they're encouraging limited entry, limited contact with staff, encouraging everything I said, using self-checkout machines. Yeah.
And so what I can do is after this call, I can certainly send you a copy of this guidance so you can take a look at it. It talks about all kinds of capacity limits. And right now, with the governor's order, they don't want any more than 25% of the capacity of the building used. So I'm not sure. I assume Ed Mullen probably can help you with the occupancy of that spaces. But then, if there's no occupancy noted, no more than 5 people per 1,000 square feet of space in the building. So it sounds like you're saying you're going to allow 6 people in that building at any one time.
Right. The capacity would be at 25% would be about 25 to 30 people, including staff.
Okay. And so you're well below that, it sounds like, right, based on your capacity. So I guess my take on it, Lisa, is that, if people can socially distance, and with 6 people in that building, I don't know, is it 2 floors or 3 floors of
3 floors
stacked? 3. And you can have the proper signage in there and kind of instruct people properly and make sure the disinfecting is being done. And as you mentioned, you're going to make sure that people have masks on. I guess I certainly understand Mike's concern where we're in a heightened level of risk in town. But again, you could almost have just a couple of people on each floor. So I guess I don't see it as terribly risky. But again, what I want to send you, Sam, is the state's sector-specific workplace standards, because it goes into a little more detail about how to arrange the space, how to handle staffing and operations, how to handle hygiene, so I think that would be useful for you to have as part of your plan.
Great, thank you.
Sam, can I say something, Lisa, please?
Yeah, go ahead, Shino.
All right. I understand that you're doing very precautious. You are very precautious. That's a good idea. The question is, when I go to the bank in different town, they want my name and they check me on my right here in front of the head to see if I'm okay. So because very few people have taken vaccine so far, very few people, not in that area. But if something happened, they have your name, and so you should be able to check them individually, and then way you'll be safe. If you can have somebody, anytime anybody comes in, you check them out, get their name, even though they make their reservation. And that way, if something happened, you'll have their name, and you can go from there.
Yes, we will have them fill out contact tracing forms, and we do have a thermometer.
Thank you. That's all I wanted to ask. You'll be safe that way.
Anybody else? Go ahead, Mike.
Sorry. I'm actually referring to the fact in Littleton, when Jim quite correctly points you in the direction of the state guidelines. Those are guidelines, and the other determination or judgment that you have to make, and that we together have to work with you on this, is the fact that you're but you're one of the places in town, including the schools, including certain restaurants, and including the grocery stores. Shall I go on? It's a list of places where the public comes in contact. So it's an added, shall we say, I don't want to use burden, but an added opportunity. And what especially is attractive about the library, it's basically a very good place for families, as it were, to find yet another way to keep themselves sane during this odd period. So the fact that it's family-centric also gives me pause, because as I'm sure Katrina can point to, as far as we know, a great deal of, shall we say, untoward events occur in the family setting. And to me, the library is one of the direct routes into a family along with the schools. So I was going to suggest, simply because at the present time we're going through a slight lull in the number of rising cases, and a decline, actually, as I'm sure we're going to hear more about later, but I'm fairly confident the virus is not going away. It's going to come. We're going to get more numbers before long, and I'm greatly concerned. I don't want to see the library caught in that, shall we say, rise. So I'm going to suggest that you follow Jim's. This is just a suggestion. You follow Jim's direction and try to match up what you're doing with what the state guidelines are, and at the same time hold off for at least another week or so and see where, shall we say, the trends in town are going and the rest of the state. Because the other piece is that Littleton is a well-traveled in and out kind of place. I don't know if you've noticed the traffic.
Mhm.
So I'm saying extreme caution, and in view of the particular, shall we say, function that you carry out, which is very important, extra caution maybe is warranted. That's all I got to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I just had a question about people that you said you're making appointments online. What about maybe seniors that don't have access to a computer? You said you're having computer time available, and you said they can call in. Is that number listed outside the post office, outside the library, so that they don't need to go online to get it?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. It's definitely posted outside, and we also communicate with COA, and we can let them know that of our plans as well, and how senior patrons can contact the library.
Okay. So I guess February 9th, is that when you said you were going to try and open?
That's the plan at the moment. If we go with Mike's suggestion, it would be later in the month. Right now, like I said, we're looking for guidance. That's not a firm date.
Okay. Yeah, I think it probably would be wise to listen to what Jim has to say and wait a little while. Continue with the curbside pickup or curbside browsing, curbside pickup, right?
Right.
So.
Can I step in as a trustee for a minute for the library?
Okay. Yeah.
Thanks.
Wow. You have many hats, Katrina.
I wear a lot of hats. I talk about COVID a lot. And I definitely appreciate a cautious approach, which is part of the reason that Sam has come up with many of the ways he's mitigating risk throughout the whole building. You know, the HEPA filters they've added, they have masked the plexiglass, the cleaning. The big thing is just to address the family entering, is that the patrons who enter should be 18 or older. So we're not having family units come in together. That was intentional to mitigate that risk of family household transmission all being in one space together, and also little kids touching everything. And the 3 hours a day on the 3 days that we do it, 2 to 3 hours, it was 6 individuals as well, way below the capacity limit of the library. So, and definitely encouraging people to spread out those appointments as much as we possible too. And the staff has a plan for pushing curbside more than they are encouraging people to come into the building, which not only protects them and whatnot, but this plan actually really aligns with the entire town hall's appointment-based services too. So that it's kind of that we have a segment of our population in town that they don't have access to computers or Wi-Fi at home and could use that service, and then also aren't benefiting from the curbside browsing and could use that service. And so having a few people in the building a couple times a week seems like we've mitigated a lot of the risk, in my opinion, and totally would follow everyone's lead on that. But it's not out of line given what other libraries have done recently up until the post-Christmas surge, or what they're planning to do in the next couple of weeks either. Or what the governor is saying, 25% capacity for buildings right now either. We're still well below that.
Okay. Anybody else? Kevin, did you have any questions or comments? Jim? No.
No, I'll send Sam the information tomorrow so that he has it.
Awesome. Great.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Sam.
Thank you.
So Jim has to be off in a half an hour or so. So Jim, why don't you go ahead with your COVID update?
Sure. So kind of a smattering of things. I guess the end of last week, the governor rescinded his orders limiting the time at which people can be out, both in facilities and gatherings in general. So it used to be from 9:30 to 5 a.m. They wanted the facilities closed, restaurants, stores, whatnot. That got rescinded on effective Monday. So the capacity limits haven't changed. So 25% of the capacity of all those facilities still remains. It's just they have a longer day to have people in those facilities. So I think that's probably the most important update on that. The one that's probably gotten everyone's attention is his announcement that phase 2 will start of the vaccine rollout plan will start next week, and that people can start registering who are 75 years old and above. And that has caused us a whole bunch of angst because I don't know that anybody in the state is ready for that or was ready for that. So we're getting a lot of calls from people who are frustrated because they can't register someplace, they can't get on a list someplace. So we're trying to manage those calls and try to help people either kind of manage expectations or find sites that might help them do what they want to do. It's really a difficult situation for those people who are trying to get an appointment, if you will, for vaccines that can start next week. One of the problems that everybody in the state is facing is supply constraint, and so we've been told that each week we can order a certain amount of vaccine, and so as I've mentioned to the board before, we're exploring options to try to get a smaller regional clinic set up so that we can actually use the doses that the state gives us. Hopefully I'll have more information on that in a short period of time so that we can try to link up with the opening of phase 2. And I think that's all I have, Lisa.
Jim.
Yeah.
Yep. I'm going to ask him a question.
Right, go ahead.
I understand what you're saying. The question is, when they give you the vaccine, how many bottles, how many people can be vaccine on the particular numbers of whatever they give you?
So there's 2 vaccines that are out there now, Gino, that the state's distributing. One is the Pfizer vaccine, which I believe has 5 doses, and maybe you can get a 6th dose out of. The vaccine we're receiving, because of the way it can be handled, is the Moderna. And the Moderna are 10-dose vials. And from our clinics that we did for the first responders, we were able, out of about 290 doses, to eke out, I think, 2 or 3 extra doses. So there's not as much extra juice in those bottles as maybe in the Pfizer. So whenever we open a vial of Moderna, we have to have at least 10 arms to put it in.
I got it.
And that's somewhat the challenge with these clinics. The storage and handling and the logistics are what makes us a little bit more challenging to set these clinics up. Even once you get the vaccine. When we did the first responders, we did it down at the Boxborough Regency. We had the ballroom. Yeah. The ballroom's about 70 by 90. About 2/3 of that room was set up with chairs for people who had gotten vaccinated because they have to sit 15 minutes after they get vaccinated, and we had to make sure they could do that socially distant. Right.
And this is going to be again in Boxborough if something happened?
No, I haven't. So we did the first responders in Boxborough. That's way too big a clinic site for the number of doses I anticipate getting from the state. So we're going to find a smaller location. And again, once I have all that information together, I can certainly get that out to people.
Yeah. What about the where the market basket is? In the back, there's a lot of room. Will they be able to use it?
Not sure what you're referring to, Gino.
At the point, you know the point?
Yep.
He doesn't have any vaccine, so he can't schedule anything or find a site yet. So.
Yeah, but I'm trying to think. Are you talking about outside the building or inside the building, Gino?
Outside the building, or you know what I mean, like they do in some area, they do it outside. I mean, I understand in Boxborough you had tents and everything, but.
No, we actually did it indoors. We did it in the banquet hall.
Yeah, I got it. Indoor, I see. Okay.
Yep. This time of year, it's kind of tough to do an outdoor clinic, particularly on the staff.
Yeah. If you need volunteers, Rotary is willing to help. That's why I'm asking.
Okay, thank you very much. Once I get a little closer to knowing that, I'll let you know.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you.
No problem. Yep.
Okay.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, Mike.
Well, just don't want to. Okay, Jim. I noticed on the website they post phase 2. Let me just turn this guy off.
Not if it's Dr. Fauci. Don't
He
don't-
never calls on that phone. There's another phone that he uses.
The
Anyway.
bat phone.
All right. So anyway, okay. So phase 2 has many parts, and it starts off with the 75 plusers. Okay.
Correct.
So
Yep.
that's a population of a certain size. Then there's the 65 and I forget how it's done, but it's basically eventually gets very quickly to people with one or more underlying conditions. And then there's a whole series. It's a fairly large chunk of a particular population, certainly much greater than first, unless I'm wrong. Is this on an equivalent size as far as you can make out net in the second phase to what you were dealing with first responders and associates? Or is this?
I don't know how many people over 75 are in the state. I know that when they reordered the priorities, so that first priority used to be over 75 or older and people with 2 comorbidities.
Right.
And what they did was they moved the individuals with the comorbidities to the next priority group, which actually got bumped up from the bottom to just below the over 75ers, which probably irritated the school teachers because they were in that next lot of people who kind of got bumped down a little bit. So I don't know the numbers in each one of those groups.
It's not the numbers. It's the I just want to know whether or not you've gotten any guidance at all about when is, shall we say, priority 1 folks. Is that going to be completed first and then you move on to the next prioritized group? Or are you going to be doing both at the same time?
I'm hoping that we get closer to the end of the priority group and then they move to the next one, only because that next one opens it up to a lot more people.
Agreed. Okay. So
And
you're
so
hoping
at
for
this
that.
point,
Yeah, you're hoping for that, but you've gotten no guidance on how the doses are going to be timed for that, because that also affects.
and that's
Yeah.
That's right. That's the big part of it, is how much vaccine will be available. Right now, with the constraints, we're probably not able to do all that we should be able to do at this point. But that's, it's as part of a provider working with the state's plan, we really need to be able to follow that plan, because they're the ones who give out the vaccine.
Okay, and also for certain parts of the state, and probably to some extent the area that you're covering, a great number of the constituents have private, shall we say, have providers. Basically, the primary physician office is the provider.
Well, and so that's part of the frustration boards of health, and not just us, but when I sit on these calls, originally what we were told from the state is that when the vaccine's provided, people should be able to get the vaccine wherever they normally get vaccinated. And we the agency do about 3,000 flu shots a year for a district that has about 100,000 people or more. So we're not the main provider of people's vaccinations, but all of a sudden we're being asked to be the main provider of this one. So we're hoping that the large pharmacies and doctors' offices, where more people get vaccine than us, are going to be in the mix soon to try to help handle these phases as they are approved and are moving forward.
Okay, and my final question is: are you the interface with those private practices where primary care docs are going to be their facilities are going to be used for a significant number of, shall we say, phase 2 groups?
So we're hoping that doctors' offices will be phase 2 and beyond. So once we get into phase 3 and there's lots of vaccine, we're hoping they also have it. It was last week, the Department of Public Health, or maybe the week before, told us that the Massachusetts Medical Society was reaching out to physician practices to engage them in becoming providers. Now, some doctors' offices do; they are vaccine providers already, and so then it's just a matter of signing on to do the COVID vaccine. Getting that. You have to sign an agreement with the state to get this vaccine and administer it. So I think they were going out to try to see if they couldn't engage more practices to become providers.
Okay, so thus you're not the interface between the state. In other words, you're not the one who, shall we say, determines the number of doses that include the private providers or the physician office providers in your district.
Nope, they would do that directly with the state.
Okay. So I want to have that in front of our board so that we can make it clear, because I'm sure Jim's going to get lots of questions.
Oh, yeah.
Harassment and all the rest. I want to make sure that at least we have some backup so that when, either Janet's back in action or whatever, we can address some of the obvious questions a little bit more, shall we say, clearly, because not all this is going to fall on Jim.
Right. Jim, the CVS will be included besides the doctors?
So the state is working with the large pharmacy practices. So will every CVS store do this? I don't know. Or Walgreens? I don't know. I assume, just like us, they need to have the space to do all the things that they need to do and have people stay for the 15 minutes to be observed. So I'm not sure which one of the stores are going to sign on to do this or not.
Right, because the CVS in Littleton, they do that for the flu. You know what I mean?
But see, with the flu, in theory, you're supposed to, do the screening to see if people have had it before and if they've had any reaction to it. But in most cases, people get the shot, put their shirt back up, and then they go out the door, so you don't have to worry about them hanging around. Right. They just come and go. This one here, you're really supposed to, because of the potential for reaction, have them observed.
I understand. Yeah, I understand. So maybe private doctor will do it. My private doctor will have it probably. In Harvard.
We're hoping that, particularly when you get to the categories where it's the two comorbidities, I would think that that's an important person to have giving you the vaccine so that you can have the conversation about your underlying health conditions and the vaccine.
I got it. Yeah.
So maybe I know Katrina's on and she'll talk about, I'm sure, about this, but if we could maybe get, for everybody's sake, something on LCTV that tells people there's a where do I get my vaccine website, right, Jim? So maybe we can get that.
Yeah, that's right. So that mass.gov.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, that mass.gov/COVID vaccine website that has a place where you can go and they changed it a little bit to include COVID vaccination locations for individuals and eligible groups. So it gives you kind of a graphic to see what group you may be in. There is a disclaimer up there tonight. I'm looking at it. Due to the high demand and constrained vaccine supply, COVID-19 vaccination appointments are limited. More appointments will be available based on the supply from the federal government. Appointments will be added on a rolling basis. So that disclaimer is right on the state's website. So it's unfortunate, but that's and then they have a chart that kind of shows you where your eligibilities lie and what groups are eligible to get vaccine. And at this point here, it's all the phase one priority groups, and then the first priority group in phase 2 as of February 1st.
And I also like to point out that if you look at that map, you will see that the area around Littleton is from at the present time, at least. Maybe Jim's looking at something I didn't get a chance to see yet. It's a desert. There are no facilities around with, I think, 10 miles of us, at least. I think Lawrence. Like Leominster, I think, is the next closest place. Yep. Or Lowell.
Yeah, my folks are 80 and they're going to Danvers.
Okay.
So, all right. So I'm going to try and see if we can talk to Ed Mullen and Dave from LCTV or Kirby and see if we can get something just steering people into that website, and maybe have an order of priority slide put up too. Maybe Katrina has that, or I have something too that I found today too. So, any other questions for Jim? Jim, can you hang on for just a few minutes, just in case you need to? I know you have to go.
Yep. I'd like to hear as much of Katrina's presentation as at least find it instructive. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, Katrina. Thank you. You have a little bit of good news this week, right?
I do. A little bit. Little highlight.
A little bit.
All right, you guys can see my slides, I'm assuming. All right, so this is that first, I guess it's not the landing page, but the 4 main metrics that we always talk about. So as you can see, kind of everything is either stabilized and leveled off, or we've actually, cases are actually dipping back down. So things are definitely looking better than they have for the last month or so, especially since the holidays. So this is, since we're at the Board of Health meeting, I'm going to actually go into more detail for you guys than I do for any other board. So the graph on the left here is the number of tests. And as you can see, the number of tests picked right back up. So this is Christmas right in here, this dip. So we're back at this approximately the same level as we were before Christmas, which had been the same level since before Thanksgiving. So we're kind of in this this is where we have been for a while spot. And as you can see, as testing picked back up, our test positivity also came back down. So test positivity is the number of positive tests divided by the total number of tests conducted by date, and it's currently at 4.98%. And the goal is 5% or less, so we are right at that threshold. And this is really dependent on who's getting tested. I know that colleges picked back up. They're starting to return students to campus, and there's actually some K-12 testing started already. So the number of people in the denominator may be different than it was before Christmas. So we'll have to kind of track this for a while and see what's happening. So this is the number of confirmed cases. You can see that this is right after Christmas. It went up until right after New Year's, that week after New Year's, and then we've been on a decline since then. The 14-day incidence rate this week was 59.4 per 100,000 people, which last week it was 75.5. That's a pretty marked drop, which is great. Very encouraging sign. And then likewise, we've had this leveling off and even a little bit of a dip in the hospitalizations, and also a leveling off of deaths. So the 7-day average for hospitalizations has trended lower over the last week or so. We're now about 2,100 cases, 2,100 COVID hospitalizations a day. On the hospital and ICU capacity hasn't really changed yet. It's about 86.8% hospital beds are occupied and 82% of ICU beds are occupied. So while those two metrics are high, we would like them to be lower. If the number of cases that are being hospitalized continues to drop, then that capacity should open up a little bit. We should have some more beds freeing up. And the number of deaths have leveled off and remains at about 60 per day. So still higher than we were before Thanksgiving. For sure, when we were around 20 a day, but it's holding now, it's not continuing to rise. So that's encouraging as well. So getting to Littleton's data, Jim pulled the numbers from Maven to give us our sneak peek. So 2 weeks ago, we hit our all-time high of the number of cases that were reported in any 2-week period at 70. That was the time frame right after Christmas. And then this week, so 2 weeks later, we are at 37 cases, according to Jim, which is a large drop in the number of cases. So that puts us back to the similar level to where we were just before Christmas, and much closer to that yellow threshold line than we were a few weeks ago. But yes, we are at 10 weeks in the red. We've been in the red since just before Thanksgiving. But again, the 1 week trend is going down. 2 weeks actually, 1, 2, we've gone down twice. So let's hope that we can, with this capacity limit still being at 25% for the state, for businesses to have their capacities at 25%, hopefully that's taking, just fewer people are mixing, hanging out in places and helping to reduce transmissions, and hopefully doing so here as well. So this is the data from the last week's DPH report, last Thursday's report. So this is data through January 16th. The rate Littleton had last week was 43.5 per 100,000. And all areas that we track have been trending lower. So given that the state trends dropped a lot over the state level trends dropped, and then also Littleton dropped last week, and we know that we have fewer cases this week. we expect us to drop a little bit further. So I would expect tomorrow that all of these are lower, which would be, cross your fingers that that's what we see. So this is test positivity. So again, the total number of tests conducted in Littleton for the last 2-week period that we measured. Again, this is the report from last Thursday. There was 1,300 tests. That was actually a 20% increase in the number of tests compared to the prior 2 weeks. And our test positivity last week was 4.56%, which was just ever so slightly higher than it was the 2 weeks prior. But we're still lower than we were in a few weeks ago. So hopefully, which I can't tell you until we see tomorrow, this will be lower yet when we get the data tomorrow. But the fact that number of cases and our test positivity are trending in the same direction, and in the same direction, they're kind of mirroring the state's levels, are all good signs that I would expect lower levels tomorrow. And this is Littleton from September, from April till now. The total number of cases that we've had diagnosed in town is 366. So the majority of Littleton residents are still susceptible to getting COVID. So we need to still take care, and we still have more COVID now than we did back in the spring. But again, this trend will be lower tomorrow when we see it. So some public health things to keep in mind. We talked about this last week, but I think it's important to reiterate is that while we look at hospitalizations and deaths, those are easy metrics to measure. So that's why they're easy to talk about, and you could get the data quickly, which is why we've been looking at them for a long time. But there's more about health than just hospitalizations and death, and that includes these long-term health impacts that people are starting to report now that we've had enough data collected to start learning about it. So it's really important to note that even if people who are not hospitalized and only had mild illness have been reporting these persistent and late symptoms, and that includes younger people and even people who are physically fit prior to having infection, were reporting symptoms for months after their illness had recovered. So these are some pretty major things that we don't know if these are going to persist for a long term the rest of the life, or if it's just going to take a little bit more time to recover from. So we're still learning more here, but it is important to understand that when we're trying to reduce spread, we're also trying to reduce people getting long-term illness that will take them a while to recover, that might impact employment and things like that. So there is importance to reducing spread wherever we can. The other thing that has come up in the last few weeks, I'm sure you guys have heard that there are variants that are emerging and we're starting to learn about. So with more spread, COVID has more chance to mutate, and more mutations may or may not be important. The scientists are currently monitoring these 3 variants that you keep hearing about in the news, and to characterize what the impact of these mutations have on transmissibility and severity of disease, and any impact that they might have on the vaccines or by risk of reinfection. So the one that has been been identified in Massachusetts is the UK variant, which is it's been estimated to be 40 to 70% more transmissible, depending on the resource you're looking at. The recent data was just reported out of the UK that it actually might cause more severe disease as well. So this is one to keep our eyes on as things go on. And this is the one that's predicted to be a dominant strain in the United States by March. So what it does mean that at this point in time, all the mitigation strategies that we've had in place for a while should still work against the variant. It just might be time to really make sure that you're using as many layers of cheese as you can, the masks, the distance, the crowd, avoiding crowds, things like that. So speaking of cheese, while the state and local trends are very promising, we can't get complacent. So Dr. Fauci, I was listening to his press conference today, and he was saying, this is a great sign. It's nice to have this pause, but he doesn't think it's going to hold. He thinks this is the post-holiday kind of plateau, and that we're going to end up going back up. And also, given the variants, it's really important to up our game and reduce the risk of transmission as much as we can at this point. So like we've been talking all along, here are all the layers of mitigation strategies that we have available to us. And like we've been talking about, each one has holes, but when we layer them up, it's harder for the virus to get through the holes. So this week, I've actually highlighted 3 of the layers that I want to touch on in my next few slides. So that's mask quality, pool testing, and vaccines. So this is one of the slides I shared last week when we were talking of introducing the idea of pool testing and how pool testing in schools can actually help prevent spread in schools, but also limit transmission in the community. So since last week, over the last couple of weeks, there's been just this rapid fire release of studies about COVID in schools, specifically the safety, how safe schools are when you do things to try to reduce the risk of spread. The point of the one that came out yesterday was from the CDC, and they were very clear that that schools can be safe if you put in a number of these mitigation strategies. It's important to keep in mind that they're also focusing on schools that haven't been open since last March. So part of their reason for pushing this is because there's a number of states and cities and whatnot that just don't have kids going into schools at all. So they're trying to provide data to make a hybrid situation maybe feasible for many schools. So as I'm reading these studies on the schools, there are some important limitations to their methods that we need to keep in mind, but the encouraging high-level summary is that when you put more layers of precautions in place, then the fewer cases and the lower the risk of in-school transmission, the fewer number of in-school transmission events occurred. So the CDC study, and there was another more recent one coming out of Duke University in North Carolina. Those 2 studies actually described situations which were almost nearly identical to the mitigation strategies Littleton Public Schools has put in place for their current hybrid model, which included masks and 6 feet and the contact tracing and quarantine, things like that, and using smaller cohorts of kids. All the things that we have put in place in our schools, and the number of cases and the spread were pretty minimal, even with the limitations of the study, which again is nice to see. But between the variants and with the vaccines for kids not rolling out until either later this year or into 2022, adding something like this pooled testing program, on which I show on the slide, would have real benefit to help monitor the situation in our schools, and also potentially break chains of transmission in the school and in the community itself for the months to come. So we still have a long way to get to everyone being vaccinated and having herd immunity. So having this layer of testing could add a real meaningful tool to our tool belt. So the benefits, there's lots of benefits to school pool testing programs. The first one, and one of the most important features, is that we actually know who's in the denominator, because we know who our school population is, and we'll be able to track the trends directly of what's happening in our school week over week and how that might actually impact the community. There's also a less data lag, because you'll get the results back quicker than what we're seeing with the state level and the town level data that I report on every week. So the data is more recent, if you will. Let's see. And also because we know who's in the denominator, the test positivity metric is actually really informative for helping for this kind of setting. And adding testing data may also help the school committee make future decisions about if they need to get more kids in the building more frequently. This will give them a tool to see if removing a 6-foot distancing, or doing however they can play up with those layers of cheese, they can actually see whether it's impacting transmission in the schools or not. And then I personally see a real benefit for our schools and for our town for a program like this, specifically because it's valuable information on the population that we're concerned with, and it would help some data-driven decision-making. So I encourage everyone to attend the school committee meeting tomorrow to learn more about the possibilities, and because I think they'll be presenting on the 2 pooled testing strategies they've been considering. So the other thing that you might have noticed is for lots of people are starting to double mask. So upgrading your mask is one thing we can all do. So as the variants get out there and they get trickier, if you will, they get more transmissible, then we really need to like up our game with our personal protection. So so most of us are wearing cloth masks right now, which is what has been working. It's a layer, or 2 layers or 3 layers. But making sure that you look at your mask right now and seeing if you can improve your fit, or if you can put a surgical mask in between your face and the fabric mask, but actually it just makes it harder for the virus particles to get through to you. So it also fit matters. So if you have air that's able to freely move from around the mask, like around your nose or your cheeks, and under your chin, then you're actually, it's not filtering out the particles as much as you would like them to. So checking your fit, double masking by putting a surgical mask underneath your fabric mask, or adding a filter, or wearing a KN95 mask, if you can find one, all offer increased protection and making it harder for these particles to get to you, and also to be expressed into the environment. And it's especially important for situations where you can't maintain 6 feet of distance, or you're in a setting where there are lots of people, like schools or grocery stores. I went to the eye doctor last week and I doubled up. Actually, I think I had 3 layers going on my mask, just because I knew I'd be face to face with my eye doctor, and I didn't really want to do that. So, and regardless about your mask, in addition to the mask, you should be physical distancing and limiting your time, just to reduce risk. So yes, Lisa, I have a slide on vaccines. So as Jim reported, the state started phase 2 of vaccinations by starting with individuals age 75 and older. They can start getting vaccinated on February 1st, and they opened the appointment website today, and I heard it like crashed multiple times and people were very frustrated. So what Jim said of just keep going back, I know they're adding clinics. I know they're, whenever they have supply or can figure it out, they're going to be adding more slots. So you just have to keep going back to look for slots. And I know that I know going to a computer may not be the most easy thing for someone who's older, especially maybe the 80 plus crew. So I know there is, if you go to the website mass.gov/COVID-19 vaccine, there is telephone numbers that you can give to somebody who can't operate the computer, or they also suggest you speak to your local COA. So hopefully our town will have some resources to help individuals who need a hand to do this. And that's all I have on that, because Jim is definitely the best information on the vaccines. So that is today.
Great. So maybe
Hey,
we can-
Katrina, can I ask you a question,
Yes.
Lisa?
Yeah.
Isn't it enough that we have 19, the now we're gonna have another virus superior to that one?
Yeah, well, it's still COVID-19. It's just upping its game and deciding to make itself more transmissible.
Somebody's trying to produce different I call it COVID-19 1, 2. It's going to be the third one maybe later. What are we going to be doing? Are we going to wear the mask here for another 10 years or what? I mean, what's going on, honey? I thought the V19 will be enough. No, they're going to get another one now. They got it. What do they call it? Number
Katrina,
2.
Can I help you out, Katrina?
Yes, please, Mike. You're better at this than I am.
Yeah.
Gino, I hate to tell you, this is called evolution.
This is called that somebody want us to be gone forever.
No. It's evolution. And since it's the Board of Health, I can, talk about information that it's facts. That in addition, I can tell you here on the database that I use, there are at least 3 more that have been identified by the very good people in Denmark who really do a really great job identifying differential identification of new variants. The United States sort of stinks at this at the moment. We're sort of in the middle of the pack in our technical ability to fish out and identify variants. So please take it with a grain of salt. the stories about variants in the US. We have no idea until someone gathers enough material and money, puts it together to do the close analysis that has to be required. So, and not all variants are created equal. Some of them are not going to be as, shall we say, as shall we say, as contagious even as the one we have. But most of the ones, at least that I get to hear about, are definitely considered to be in there when they test them with animal models. They use ferrets and some other stuff, some other animals. They look far more contagious than the one we've got.
I hope not. But anyway,
So I think Katrina's warning should be, or advice about doubling up the mask if you're going to be out at grocery stores or any place where it's
always
not
do.
a medical setting. Doubling up the mask and keeping the distance and doing testing in schools and testing everywhere else that we can get are all good ideas.
Okay. Just wait and see. That's it.
Louise or Kevin, do you guys have a question or comment for Katrina?
Do. Get a violin. Da-da-da-da. Sorry, Lisa, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Okay, I do have a question for Mike or Katrina. I'm not sure who can answer it, but so as the virus mutates, is the vaccination going to be good for the mutations?
No, I don't think so.
It depends.
I'm sorry to put you on the spot. I know.
Let me
You
give
probably
the
can't
classic
tell.
epi
Yes.
like line is it depends. Like it depends how it mutates and whether that impacts neutralization and things like that. And Mike knows more of the biology of that, but there's some.
I'm sure there's no way to predict.
Oh, boy.
So, Mike, it's my understanding that the UK variant is not expected to impact the vaccine efficacy.
That's
That
correct.
is-
This is
yeah,
Corey. Can you hear me?
They've done enough tests because there's so many sick
1
people
second, Corey.
in the UK. There's so many sick people in the UK that have that particular brand of virus. They're able to do direct tests to see whether or not the, shall we say, the vaccine that they're using there, or any vaccine that they know about or have been released for use in the US and the UK, and there's one other country. So far, the answer is for the one in the UK, the vaccine works just fine. Okay, and as far as we can tell, the other ones, the one that hasn't reached the US very much, that's been picked up, at least in South Africa, there's a version of it, and there's another version of it circulating somewhere in Southeast Asia. That one looks a little less promising in terms of how it interacts with the vaccine, but not enough has been done to be sure.
Mm-hmm.
So, but the longer we wait to do any of these mitigation efforts, as shall we say, even something as important yet not directly impactful on the disease itself, like testing, the more opportunities there are going to be for the virus to go through changes that we don't want. That is, it's opportunistic. The more people that get sick, you can look at them as the virus is doing experiments, and the more experiments it does, it finds better ways to do what it does, which is to make copies of itself.
Yeah.
So the longer we wait around, the more people get infected in the world, the more the virus has a chance to experiment, whether it's here, Russia, China, Japan, whatever.
Somebody's playing with it. Yep.
Mike, I have a technical question about the virus, and maybe we talk about it another time. But according to Katrina's slides, and we've all talked about the long haulers and all the problems that people are going to have. How is this affecting all the systems? The heart, the lungs, renal, dermatological, neurological. Is it like a super virus or are viruses? Do other viruses affect all these systems too?
There are other viruses that will have similar effects, but this one, because we were, if you pardon the expression, better prepared to ask and sometimes answer the question. It was there was an alert put out. The experience with HIV had a lot to do with the way that the medical profession thought about this virus, even though they were surprised by a lot of it. So, but I can't answer I don't know what the answer is.
Right.
But since it's an RNA virus and the things that it uses are very familiar to, and it can be the analogs, the similarities, the things that we already have in our bodies already that go bad, okay, or work just fine. They're similar enough to the virus and the way the virus works that we're probably going to find out in the next 5 years just why it happens, how it happens, but more importantly, to find therapies for, shall we say, mitigating that. But at the moment, we just got to get the virus population down close to zero as we can get.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Thanks, Mike. Corey, did you have a comment about, I forget what you.
Yeah, I was going to just comment on the vaccines and the variants. And just, I mean, Mike said everything, so I don't really have to say anything more, but I will just kind of back up what he said about the UK variant. There's been enough studies at this point where it doesn't seem like there's any concern in the field for the efficacy of the current vaccinations to be able to handle that just fine. They're able to take serum from people who were vaccinated and basically run tests to see if their antibodies will neutralize that virus, and they do just fine. And so they can do direct tests using the blood from people who have had the vaccination and see that it actually eliminates the virus. And so, as Mike said, the jury is out with respect to the South African variant. It seems that some of the amino acid changes in the spike protein, which is responsible for kind of connecting to the ACE on your cell surfaces, may actually physically look quite different in a way that may make the current vaccines, which have the normal kind of spike protein structure when it's made, not recognize it as well, though I think it's still theoretical. And I don't know that there's been any direct plasma studies to that effect. But I do think Moderna is coming up with a booster for this reason. And the whole strategy, the way that these vaccinations are made, allow for much more rapid translation of being able to do boosters like this instead of having like the vaccination strategies in the past, because these are mRNA. It's literally just changing a couple of letters in like a word, if you will, and putting that into a book rather than having to like redraft an entire book. And so it makes it a whole lot easier and faster to change. So though we are up against, this is to Gino's point, though we're up against the fact that mRNA viruses, they're going to mutate and they're going to evolve. And we can't really do much about that except try to mitigate spread. They only mutate because they're able to spread unchecked. And the more we can stop that spread, the less variations we're going to have. But the good news is that though we're going to have this evolution in different strains, and some are going to probably have more transmissibility, we do have this really great arsenal that we can change rapidly in order to meet the demand. So it'd probably mostly look more like just boosters along the way.
All right, great.
Thank you.
Thanks, Corey.
And another thing about the vaccine is we need to get something like 80% of our population vaccinated, but the trials for kids, so 12 and under, are just underway now. And so that would be, I would be surprised if the vaccines get approved under emergency use authorization for kids at all. So we're not anticipating 12 and up to be able to access vaccine until the end of this year, but also the trials are then going to de-escalate in ages. So I think it's like 6 to 11 would be the next group. And those trials haven't even, the protocols are being written now. There's not even, those aren't even underway yet. So we're looking, if you're thinking 25% of your population is kids under the age of 18, then we've got a while to get them vaccinated as well. So we're in this for a while in terms of using all of our mitigation strategies we can possibly put in front of us, especially in a setting like a school where most of the people in there are less than 18. I would be surprised if they were not still having to use masks and doing some sort of mitigation strategies in the schools starting next fall as well. It's not just getting to the end of the school year. We need to look forward. So that's where the testing program could be really useful.
Mhm. All right, any questions from the board at all?
Just one question.
Sure, Dave.
Just speaking to Katrina's point about testing, given this variant, I don't know, I know you don't have a crystal ball, but what does science tell us about when it may be impacting us more significantly, and how might that help us direct a testing program in town as far as timing goes?
So from everything I've read from multiple sources, the predictions are that it will become the dominant variant in the UK version, will become the dominant variant in the United States in March. And that's because it's been identified in 22 states, and that's coast to coast. And there's multiple cases in each state at this point. It's not just one in each state. So I think we just don't do enough surveillance to say that it is already the dominant variant. So I think the predictions that I've read is that in sometime in March, it will be the dominant variant. So like in terms of testing, so what happened in the UK is in November, they did all of these targeted lockdowns of things where adults go. So businesses and, their workplaces, things like that were shut down to try to put a lid on their spread, but they kept schools open. So what happened in the UK is during that time frame when schools were open, kids were suddenly jumped in the number of cases, and that's when the variant, it like doubled. Like they had double the number of cases with the variant, and then kids were more likely to bring it into the household because they were the ones out and about and exposed. So it flipped what we had for exposure patterns back in the spring. So my guess is that if things get out of control in the United States, we're going to have a similar, like schools being the last thing to shut down kind of situation is exactly what I would anticipate policy makers do. And then I would expect to see kids being more impacted by the exposure because they have more exposure. And if that's true, a school testing program might catch those cases earlier before there could be spread in the schools, or even catch the case before it could spread in the household. So and before it could spread around the community. So I feel like it would be great to have a testing program up and running as quickly as possible. I just don't know about the logistics of what the school committee has and the administration have figured out in terms of feasibility and that kind of stuff. But yeah, if we could get in the next month a testing program on its way, it would be awesome.
So by testing in the schools, we could keep them maybe open longer and also mitigate and suppress the spread of the virus within our community.
Yes, that's the goal.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Katrina. Dave, is there anybody in the audience or anybody with their hands raised?
Okay.
I don't see
I want to say
hands.
thank you for everything, and I understand what Mike says. The question is, if we had one virus, we're going to have a SARS number 2. I hope number 3 and 4 and 5. This is too much. Somebody's trying to kill us.
Okay,
But
Gino.
they're not going to kill me, that's true, because I'm a Superman. Okay.
Dave, did you say anybody in the audience have their hands raised?
I don't see any hands. Oh, wait a minute. John has his hand raised.
Okay, John, state your name and address, please.
Hey, it's John Kurzwick, 171 Hartwell. Just a couple of comments. I sent a couple of emails about this, and this is really just a follow-on from previous requests. I don't know if Mr. Graffelli's still on.
No, he's not.
Okay, yeah, but one of the things that is, to me, is essential from a epidemiological tracking standpoint. And I understand people want to do this testing to catch active infections, but to Mr. Fratelloni's, sorry, I'm screwing your name up, but to his point, about when is it over? At some point, there's going to be a political decision. That's down the road. But to me, from a scientific standpoint, people should be looking at what proportion of the population has been infected, is currently infected, and is recovered. And the Los Angeles County Department, they've estimated 1/3, and I sent that to the board here, and I'm hoping Mr. Graffelli will put some pressure on our county public health officials to try and figure that out. Because like I said, if we're in a scenario where maybe 40% or 50% of the population has been infected, which I don't think is outside the realm of possibility, it's a different ballgame. Okay, because you can get vaccinated I see Mr. Zeldin shaking his head, but you can be vaccinated or you can get the infection. And Germany just said that the people that have been infected, they still have antibodies 8 months along. So that's a study that just came out. So this idea that we're going to get to zero infections, at some point, we're going to have to let go of that because the virus is endemic. Now, second to that is the mask. And I'm a little upset that we've already added let's put 2 masks on to the Swiss cheese. Before we add that, we need a peer-reviewed study that says 2 masks are better than 1 mask. Otherwise, we are moving into the land of superstition. So please take that off the Swiss cheese chart until you have a peer-reviewed study that says 2 masks is better than 1. We can't keep going down this path of, hey, Dr. Fauci said so. That's why, I mean, it's bizarre. We're moving into the land of bizarre. So please take it off the Swiss cheese, and until you get a peer-reviewed study that says it works. Thank you.
So I actually do need to respond to that if it's okay, Lisa.
Go ahead, Katrina. Yep.
The better quality masks, including double masking, has actually been studied and has been reported on. There are articles out there that are measuring that. So
when did this occur?
This has came out in the last couple of weeks.
Okay, could you forward that, or at least put a link on your Swiss cheese chart that shows that works?
I can try to find those. Yes, okay. I have it somewhere. It's just not right at my fingertips at this very moment. But that is something that is, from the resources that I've seen, is a logical and accessible mitigation strategy that everyone can have access to. So that is not just me making stuff up.
But that's where the World Health Organization was.
Okay. Yeah.
Back in 2019.
John. Okay, John, you've made your comments. Thank you. Mike, did you have anything to respond?
There's nothing here to respond to.
Okay.
Nothing.
Okay. All right. And Dave, again, any other hands raised?
Yes, we have Amy.
Hi, Amy.
Hi, my name is Amy Tez. I'm at 117 Whitcomb Avenue, and I just want to be a voice to speak up. The previous speaker presented pretty similar information at the school committee meeting when talking about testing last week. And as a concerned citizen and parent, I'm really concerned that anecdotal information is being put forward in these meetings. I agree that we need to utilize scientific data to make decisions. And it's dangerous, I think, to kind of put forward some of this information and say that we shouldn't be paying attention to measures that we can take right now. I certainly am hopeful that we'll get testing up in the schools as soon as possible. And I'd like to just ask that we really just, I don't know how, but put an asterisk out there about information like that when comments are being made because if somebody just grabbed a hold of that little snippet of information that was just said, they might think that that's something that this town supports. And I'm hoping that we, as very concerned citizens, I think we're all very concerned and worried, can really in these meetings rest upon scientific data as it's coming out and moving forward. I certainly am hoping, and I'm not sure if you all have a plan to approach the school committee with your thoughts about testing within the schools and how to get that going. It seems to be kind of moving forward rather slowly, and I'm not sure what your thoughts there are, but again, I just want to be a voice for, you know, speaking out against some of this anecdotal stuff that's put out in these meetings. Thank you.
Yeah, I think, Amy, that I think the board is in favor of a testing program, and I'm going to be attending school committee tomorrow, and I think Katrina, you usually present too, and Kevin, you'll be there tomorrow too. Yeah, I don't know about.
Yeah, just to reply to Amy, it's been about a month since the school committee's been in touch with the testing program. Miramis, I think January 4th, Mr. Fontanella had a meeting with them, and they were able to talk about a potential testing program, and then the state came out with their free testing program. So there's a couple different options that they have. I think the time for them to apply for the state afforded program has since lapsed. So I don't know, maybe Mike, it hasn't, I'm not sure.
No, they made the application for the state
okay.
version of it, and
Okay.
the state since has kept it open because of the appreciation of the value of such a testing program.
Great.
And Mike, do you know which way they're leaning, Mike?
Not a clue.
No.
And my personal opinion, and it's, you know, just an opinion, and that is in looking at both the test regimes, is that any testing program that they implement that basically does surveillance will have the effect that Amy and a lot of other parents in the town actually needs.
Well,
thank you.
And hopefully tomorrow night they decide to do something, as Lisa actually pushed the select board last night. And
try to. Amy, if you want to attend or voice your concern as a parent.
Yes, I'm planning on it.
Great.
Thanks.
Okay. Thank you. Anybody else, Dave?
Elisa, can you send me the, so I can be there too? Give me the ID number.
It's on the town website, Gino, on the school committee agenda.
Okay.
So you just go to littleton.com, go to the school committee, and they'll have the agenda with the Zoom link. Corey and Kevin, did you guys have anything that you wanted to add?
No.
Yeah, hi, this is Kevin. One thing that so contact tracing, the exposure notification, all those kinds of good things. We're still waiting on the state to move forward on that. I haven't received any new information on that information. However, the NFL and the CDC came together and produced a paper. I'm reading through the paper right now. There is some interesting contact tracing stuff in there, and I hope to have some of that information pulled out and put into some sort of presentation for you guys. There is some interesting technology changes for that, and I'm hoping to have some more information, some better information about that in the future. But that's kind of neat to see some of that come out. But that's all that I've got.
Kevin, the NFL is using pooled testing too, isn't it? Or part of the NFL?
You know, I don't know what type of testing they're using. In the paper, they talked about they're using, you know what? I don't know. I don't know what the answer to that is. We can certainly dig into that protocol a little bit. But I don't know. Sorry,
it'd just be interesting to let the school committee know that that's, you know, that they're using that too.
Yeah, and I think that would be something that we could probably dig into and see, but you know, what's there.
Yeah.
But the interesting thing from the contact tracing is that they're using similar technologies that we have in our phones for when they're outside the facilities. Inside the facilities, they're using some new technology that allows them to better pinpoint where people are. And that way they can do a better job at contact tracing. And this company specifically is in business to do that type of stuff. So this might be helpful, not necessarily for the youngers, K through 5, but definitely something for the older ones in the high schools, as there are more movement throughout the school day, and that the cohorts, the kids in classes, they change from one class to the next, and they may not stay within the same cohort. So hopefully, if we can get a little more information on this and see what's going on, it may also enhance the school's ability with the pooled testing and stuff, and to move forward.
Hi, Kevin.
Kevin, I read something about a chip that they're using with the NFL that helps to identify where everybody's located, and that's why you see some players without the masks on. Do you know anything?
So the players and stuff like that. So one of the things that are out there, the chip that they're using, or the technology that they're using, that was in there, is made by a particular company. But the technology that they're using is something called millimeter wave technology. This technology allows it's a higher frequency than what we have for Bluetooth, and it allows them to better track where those players are at all times. So you'll see the players, they're wearing on their wrists what looks like a watch, but it actually is part of that millimeter wave technology. So they know where each of those players are as they're practicing and who's interacting with what. They talk about strict masking requirements and things like that. So you see that on the sideline, the players are doing a much better job of masking up. Sometimes they're better examples of masking up than others, but earlier on in the season, it wasn't as you saw more opportunities for people to mask up. So I think they're doing, the report just came out, but I wanted to let you know about that technology.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. Any other questions about COVID? No. Okay. So we'll move on to correspondence. I think, Louise, you wanted to read something?
I can't find my copy of it.
Oh.
I know, I was looking. Do you have it?
Give me a second. I know somebody who probably does have it.
Yeah.
You know the date? Corey, when did you send your letter?
Oh, I'm happy to read it since I'm right here with you.
Okay.
Oh, thank you, Corey.
Yeah, sure. Let me I also have to look for it. Hold on. This is also in response to the previous caller. So let me preface it by saying that.
Can I ask one more? Excuse me. Can everybody turn off their cell phones? There's a cell phone that's ringing. I don't know if it's Gino or Louise. Can you?
No, it's not mine. Mine's off.
Okay. All right. Sorry. Go ahead, Corey.
That's okay. And I guess before I read this letter, I want to preface this with the previous caller, Amy, who called in saying that it's dangerous when you have folks that are putting out misinformation. And as we learned tonight, there was a caller that actually provided misinformation. There are publications, peer-reviewed publications in top-tier journals about masks, about the efficacy of masks, and to claim that there's not is just, well, I'll read you the letter and then you'll understand my frustrations as a COVID publishing research scientist. So I wrote this 6 days ago, and I sent it to most of the members, though I don't know that I had everybody's email, to the Board of Health and the school committee. And it goes like this. Thank you all for leading our town through these challenging times. I feel like so much is asked of you, and I can't imagine the pressure that you're under to make decisions with an ever-changing landscape of information and misinformation. I've listened in to several meetings now with an increasing sense of alarm based on one caller in the town who asked to consider alternative ways of discussing COVID. I'm grateful that our town allows all voices to be heard, and in that spirit, I'm not writing to try to stifle anybody, but rather I'm hoping to provide some context for you as you hear different points of view on COVID-related data. My main concern is that folks are cherry-picking data to suit their agenda, and that the literature they cite and data that they are suggesting skew toward that agenda, when we should be looking at all available information in an unbiased way. I'm also concerned that folks assume that they are experts in fields in which they are not trained. For example, despite being a research scientist publishing in peer review on COVID, I am not an epidemiologist and therefore realize that there's likely more to the landscape than I'm privy to based on differences in training. I would urge each of us to take suggestions from folks without specific training with a grain of salt. Last night's Board of Health meeting was a case in point. The caller suggested that data surrounding the increased transmissibility of the UK variant should not be taken seriously because one of the articles was authored by Neil Ferguson, who also modeled incorrectly a much higher death rate than what panned out in the beginning of the pandemic. It's understandable why somebody might be skeptical, but this author is one of many who reported on this variant. There are several red flags to this type of warning from lay folks who have access to information and data, but who lack specific training in order to contextualize the literature. Taking the entire volume of information about an emerging threat and talking about it through the lens of one report without taking the time to understand what else is known is a dangerous form of cherry-picking evidence to back a particular point of view. There are several independent reports supporting the increased transmissibility about this particular variant, but not one of those was mentioned, only the one which undermines the seriousness of the threat we are facing. Unfortunately, we live in an era of misinformation where people conflate science with the outcome that they are trying to achieve, again, by cherry-picking data or information. The same caller has in the past suggested that only some of the data released by the State Department of Health should be used to inform the town on the current state of the pandemic because, to paraphrase, it's not all doom and gloom. People are hurting, being out of work, and we need to get the right metrics. When we look at the data, we need to look at all the data and not pick the parts that suit our desired outcomes. We can't pick the right metrics. We need all the metrics, and we need a trained epidemiologist to help break down those metrics into lay terms. We are at an inflection point now where more and more towns, and now the state, are pushing for additional data through K through 12 testing. This can only add to our knowledge base, which will enable each of you to make informed decisions for our children and our town moving forward. When I hear pushback on adding more data because of cost and logistics, I welcome the thoughtfulness that each of you brings to the conversation. But when I hear pushback because there is an agenda to undermine the seriousness of what you're facing, I'm disheartened, and I hope very much that people listening are able to discern between the nuance of due diligence and the haphazardness that comes from conflating science with their own political agenda. The end.
Whoa, what a letter. That's great.
Thank you very much, Corey.
Yeah, thanks.
Yep. And I think tonight was a perfect example of why it's dangerous. And we need people that know the full context of it. Anybody can get data and crunch the numbers. Any single one of us can. And we should all do our best to understand what's going on. But for real, you should really listen to folks that have specific training. It's not a question of being educated. It's not a question of being smarter. And it's not a question of any of those things. It's literally just a question of having the full context of a training set. That's all.
That is true.
You want to say anything, Mike?
No, Corey said it.
Yeah, very nicely.
Yep. Thank you, Corey.
Yeah.
Write a book.
Does anybody else have any correspondence?
No, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you
Thanks,
for everything.
Corey. And Katrina and Kevin. Move on to minutes. And I don't think we received anything for 1/20/113 yet. Am I? Something for 12/23.
I thought.
I saw December 30th.
Yeah, there's a December 30th.
Okay. All right. So,
Motion to approve December 30th as written.
A second.
Did I change this on the agenda then? 12/23/20 still. Okay. We'll do a roll call. Kevin Baker. To
Wait,
accept the minutes.
wait.
You're gonna-
I think Kevin said 12:30, right?
I did.
Okay, yeah, I just wrote that wrong. So a motion to accept the minutes for 12:30. Kevin?
Was I present that day, Annie? The
You were
13th?
not. You were not.
Okay.
All right,
Yes.
so Kevin Baker,
Kevin Baker, yes.
Louise Nichols,
Louise Nichols, yes.
Mike Zeldin,
Mike Sheldon, yes.
Lisa Flanagan. Yes. Okay. Move on to member comments. Kevin, did you have any? Go ahead, Mike.
I'll make this quick. Since I won't be at tomorrow's school committee meeting, I'll be elsewhere on behalf of the BOH. I would like to, shall we say, endorse your effort and everyone else who attends to make it crystal clear to the school committee that this is a request, a firm request on the part of the Board of Health to implement a test system, surveillance test system. Along the lines, very frankly, of the presentation or the letter that you read to the the select board. And the fact that they did not catch the fact that that was your ask. You were asking them to support that letter. And they just breezed right past that ask. So here, I have to say that certain questions it may be worthwhile for this board to undertake. I'm not sure that this is the hour or the time to do it because we're accumulating information. But I do notice that there's a pattern from my perspective that's emerging that came out of, shall we say, the cauldron of stress and test that the COVID has presented to this town and elsewhere. And what has been, in my view, not necessarily exposed, but definitely revealed, are certain issues regarding the Board of Health, public health as it's done in this town, and where do we go from here? And I just want to let you know that I'm very much interested in pursuing this question, and I hope others will join me on the board to be looking at where we are and where we ought to be. But I just want to make it clear that we support, at least I hope all of us support a most forceful emphasis and recommendation and request to the school committee, to put it very lightly, that they don't delay any longer. The facts have been out there for 3 or 4 months, not just 1 month. They've been out there 3 or 4 months. Thanks.
Right. Just go ahead, Kevin.
I agree, Mike. I hope that the school committee takes the guidance and the recommendation of the Board of Health.
Seriously.
I'm wondering, at what point does this board express its absolute authority to go ahead and mandate such a testing program? And what does it take to even get that done? Because that's 100% within our authority. And how long are we going to wait? Because it's been, like you said, 3 or 4 months. So.
Right. And like I said in the letter last night, that we are unanimously in favor of starting the process to start. It should have been already probably started the process in a school surveillance testing program. So I think Jason was.
Is anyone going to be held accountable if they don't take our recommendation?
I do not know. I can't answer that question. I think Justin's on and somebody. Okay. All right. All right. Any other member comments?
You can try if the selectmen make a objection. We'll see what happens.
I'm not talking about selectmen.
Talking about the school committee, Gino.
I understand that, but the question is, the
We're not talking
select
about selectmen.
also are it.
No, we're not talking
All
about
right.
selectmen. No,
Okay, we can suggest this. I agree with you guys.
thank you.
Let's see what happens.
Okay.
Do you want, I realize it's 8:34. You probably all have better things to do. Is there an appetite here, Lisa, for a discussion about Plan B if there's delay and or rejection of moving ahead?
I don't have a problem talking about it. I don't know if anybody else, I don't know any of the answers.
I have time.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
We're looking here for ideas. Please understand, we don't have to do this.
Yeah.
I hate to go into a room where we don't have at least something in our hip pocket in any situation. When you go to war, go to any of these kind of things, you also have something else in your pocket beside the one thing.
I'm sorry, but I'm just thinking that we should see what they've been up to, if they've been up to anything. I know that you guys want, I don't have an answer either. I don't know what Plan B would be if they said they're not going to do it because look, the numbers are going down or something like that, but I think it's pretty understandable with the variant and, it's a community. It's not just for the kids in school, it's for our community.
Right.
That it's beneficial. So,
Okay.
I'll try and.
May I ask a question? It might be totally out of line, but I can see that Mr. Dan Kane is in the audience, and I know he's got a ton of experience on boards of health. And I don't know if he's got any recommendations for where our Plan B might be at this point to get a testing program implemented. And I don't even know if he's listening right now. But
They should have a test.
But if you were, if you would chime in, that would be helpful.
All right, so Dave, if you can let Dan Kane in, if he's. And I see Justin's in the audience too. Maybe he has questions or comments. Dan, can you state your name and your address, please?
Of course, Dan Kane, 15 Whitetail Way. So sorry about that. Of course, I've been on the whole meeting. I step away 2 seconds to send the kids off to bed, and that's when someone starts looking for me. So I apologize for that delay. It sounds like the question was, what is the Board of Health's scope of authority?
Well, Plan B, I think, is what if the school committee doesn't decide to implement a testing program, what can we do to implement?
Again, just being a citizen, not a lawyer, certainly not a public official. The Mass General Law allows basically the Board of Health to identify any risks to health within their community and take any action to remove, mitigate, I forget the three words off the top of my head, you caught me in the middle. But basically, there's a catch-all that the Board of Health's scope of authority is independent under Mass General Law to identify and remediate any risk that it deems as a public health issue. Mm-hmm. It's the catch-alls. It's built so that they recognize we can't identify everything, and trusting boards of health to be appropriate and intervene when necessary and have the scope of authority to do that. Now, any student at Littleton Public Schools, again, this is my non-legal opinion, would be either a resident or a customer of the town. And if the Board of Health views that there is a public health risk of having, basically a community of the population, or a portion of the population at risk if something is not done, if there is not some intervention, in this case being testing, then the Board of Health can order that because of the associated risk and, indoor space, 8 hours a day, the justification that they can order that all students will be tested, however often that, some of our epidemiology friends, and Jim as the paid professional health agent would deem most effective and appropriate. Certainly we've seen, not so much from public K through 12, but certainly both in college, the college population, as well as some of the bubbles, the professional sports leagues, some of the other ones where they have similar situations of large populations in small spaces, that there's enough precedent for examples that we could be following pretty easily. I think Northeastern they've created their own lab. I think they're doing once a week at this point.
Yeah.
As you say, I think it's once a week, I forget. But so those populations have identified it, and this is their standard. So it would not be going out on a limb or being the first to do it. It's been out there and it's been shown to be what appears to be, again, not looking at the research, only from the media, is that it's been relatively effective, that outbreaks in college campuses, for example, are actually less than their surrounding communities. It's working for them, it appears to be. So again, the board has wide scope and authority if the Board of Health chooses to use it. In most cases, the only recourse, certainly we don't want to think of it that way, to overturn a board decision is the court system. So, for example, the selectmen or those kind of pieces, we never want to get to that piece of we're enforcing. We'd rather be cooperative, I would think, by approach. But the board does have a wide scope of authority if they choose to use it and exercise it.
For that information, Dan. Thanks for calling him. Thanks for calling him in, Kevin. And Justin, did you have anything you wanted to add, or anything that you've thought, the school committee has thought any more about this?
No, I'll just say I've started attending these meetings because I kind of get the sneak peek as to what we're going to hear at our school committee meetings, and I find it helpful. I think any conversation around testing in the school committee probably needs to take place during a school committee meeting. So it's certainly on the agenda for tomorrow night. I think all of us have some thoughts, and there'll be a lively, active discussion. I'm sure we'll hear from plenty of folks in town, and we'll leave that for tomorrow night.
Great. Good. I'm glad you're on tonight. Thanks, Justin. All right. Any other member comments?
I still haven't heard Plan B.
You're going to call us on this right now, Mike?
I sure am. Because,
well, I think.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I think Lisa's right. I think we have to hear what they're going to say first tomorrow night.
You're right.
Yeah.
It's probably not going to be good, but we do have to come back with a strong reply.
Right.
Yeah, the path of least resistance will be the most effective. But if they don't, if there's got to be a mandate, there's got to be a mandate, and the Board of Health will have to step up and issue that.
Yeah.
But we'll see what happens tomorrow.
Maybe our plan B is after the meeting is that we talk with town council and ask, what the way forward is to force them to do it.
First you do that, and then the town council will come to ask you why you wanted to do it.
When lawyers get involved, nobody wins. So
right. The selectmen will say to we will discuss it with the town council. The town council will say, I think I agree with the Board of Health.
Yeah, no, I can go to town council as chair, so I can do that, Gino.
Go ahead.
Well, I won't do it tonight, but we'll see what happens at school board tomorrow.
Yeah, you got to see what's going on first. Yeah, they might agree right away.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Lisa, if Justin's still here, I don't expect him to comment on what the general drift is. I'm sort of surprised. I'm sort of disappointed that he didn't go a little bit further and explain some of maybe his own thinking on the subject, since he's been attending our meetings and he's a member of the board. But what I'm interested in is his sort of dispassionate view or dispassionate account of the origins of the, shall we say, reluctance, or let's say the difficulty he sees in doing testing, leaving aside the logistic and financial issues, all of which we know can be overcome. So I'm interested sort of in what is the thinking? He's heard our thinking about why we think it's worth going forward, all of which center around what I call public health issues, educational issues, all the rest. I'm interested in what he sees. Not to present the counter so much, but obviously the school committee's been looking at this through a different lens. And I'm not looking for the outcome, his feeling of the outcome, but what he hears and sees as being the roots or the basis for what I call the measured reluctance to proceed before this. I just wonder if he's interested in giving that perspective.
Are you still on, Justin? Yep, there he is.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep.
Awesome. Again, I appreciate it. And it's not that I'm not interested in testing. It's that we have to think through the logistics of how we're going to run a testing program and see if it's even, I'm sure it's possible, but at what cost financially, and at what resources are we going to need to throw at this? So it's not to say that I don't support it, because I do support it. We just have to figure out a way to get it done. And I don't really want to say much more on it, because we need to take into account the conversations that are going to take place tomorrow night among the other members, as well as the administration. So the superintendent, the principals, everyone's likely going to weigh in on this, on what plan we might be able to put forward. So it's not a matter of, is testing good? Of course it is. It's not a matter of, can we pay for it? Of course we can. It's, how are we going to run the program? And I think that's the biggest hurdle right now. And if, as a board or as a community, we determine that above all else, we want a testing program, then we'll make it happen. Fair enough?
Mike, fair enough?
Yeah, I mean, I'm hearing that Justin is reflecting on a justified and thoughtful concern about, shall we say, the process of getting it done, not the question of whether or not to do it, but how best to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Is that a good read, Justin, of what you just said? I'm sorry.
Sorry, that's all right.
Yeah, that's accurate. Testing has benefits, and we should certainly explore those within our community. It's just a matter of figuring out at what cost to the town or to the school department, are those benefits going to be received? And it's simple math. If the pros outweigh the cons, we'll likely put it through. And I believe that would likely be the case.
That sounds promising. Go ahead, Louise.
A couple of weeks ago, remember we had Andrea Poulin come before us that she was going to do her own private testing. Mm-hmm. I wonder if they could hire her as a contractor, set her up with, let her do it.
I think she's up and running down at
Yeah, I saw a press release.
Yeah.
The other thing, and I was wondering too, is it'll depend on which version that they decide to go with. But I think there's some kind of the mirror. What was it called?
Miramis.
Yeah.
Don't they have an infrastructure with people that you can hire that will perform the testing?
Yes.
Or help us with it?
Yeah, there was an entire playbook that was sent over to, I think, the Board of Health, as well as Mr. Fontanella, way back on December 17th. And I think they've had more conversations since. So hopefully they have a better understanding of what it's going to take to make it happen and get that.
And is the state one? They give us
the state one, I think, is much more cumbersome. I think there's a lot more regulations that they have to abide by. A much more time-consuming process for the school nurses. So I think, from what I've understood, is that the school system might want to take it into their own hands and run it run it through Miramis in a different
Yeah,
faction.
the state is free for 6 weeks, but you have to do more work with
Free
it.
but not free. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Mike, kind of answer your question?
I'm not hearing a
He's
plan
not
B.
committed.
I don't think I don't think tonight there is a plan B. I think from what Justin has just said is it sort of circles around the issue of process and the inference is also the cost. And I think that the other piece that may be not necessarily missing but not emphasized enough is the benefit. The benefit may be more difficult to put a dollar figure on it, but I can tell you it reaches, we know this from other settings, we do know that the cost of not testing, quite aside from the immediate prompt effects on anyone who happens to test positive and how many chains of transmission are broken, it also has the effect of supporting the economy of the town. It keeps parents, as it were, at work.
Yep. Keep their businesses open.
It changes the dynamic quite a bit.
Right.
You know what you're doing, even if what you're doing is fantastic. No one is testing positive in the schools. Fantastic.
Get more kids
It's worth double, triple.
Can I add that the logistics of making this a feasible and sustainable thing is really important for the schools, because it can't just be a one-time thing and then it tails off because it's become cumbersome or it's not applied well. And the decision-making coming out of when you do have a case, what do you do, there's a lot of ways that this could go, could be so cumbersome that then they just give up. And so taking some time to really think through those logistics is really important to make sure that it's a sustainable thing going forward, in my opinion.
Yeah, can I add to that as well? I could not agree with that more. This has to be, there are challenges with different approaches, and finding, like I think Kevin Baker was saying, finding the path of least resistance that is the least amount of burden, but still covers the most amount of people, I think is going to be really important. And also what I was trying to get at in my letter, like I do think this is the right conversation. I think none of this is easy. There is there's not like a blueprint for how to roll this out the easiest way. But I do think that there's some pretty good options, and with the right amount of information from other towns that have rolled these out and have experience with it, that we could learn a heck of a lot in order to make the lives of the school committee and the administration and nurses as easy as possible as they implement.
Okay. And all set. Member comments?
No comment.
Move on to public comments. Dave, is there anybody with their hand raised?
John has his hand raised.
Great. John, state your name and address, and you have 3 minutes.
John Kurzwick, 171 Hartwell. I would just like to make a couple of comments on the, I think it was Miss Painter that was speaking.
Dr. Painter.
My intent is not to mislead anybody in the public anywhere. And what all I was saying, and by the way, when it comes to the mask, I didn't say that masks didn't work. What I requested is before we ask that people start wearing 2 masks, that we provide the public with a scientific study that shows 2 masks are better than 1. That's all. Relative to the test metrics, I sent the letter to the board to alert them that there were a number of people in conversations during meetings that were interpreting test positivity as prevalence. And I detailed out why we need to make sure it's clear that that is not correct. And then I recently just sent another letter asking that we make sure that we also look at hospitalizations and mortality, because those metrics are less prone to test selection bias that occurs with some of the case data that we have. And and to the point about gloom and doom, we are clearly way better off than where we were back in March, April, and May. And that's not my opinion. That's not an anecdote. That's what the state data shows for mortality and hospitalizations. And so it's true. We have to be careful about cherry picking data and so forth. And all I'm trying to do is inject, I guess, a little bit more of the other side's view to get, I guess, a more balanced approach, because in most cases it's going one way. So I guess you could say I'm biased in that realm. But I just wanted to address that. And then the last point on the testing, and this is a question actually, what's not clear to me in the testing is whether or not we're asking the school to do statistical sampling of the school, or if we're asking them to surveil the whole school. In other words, 100% of the population whenever they do a test. So maybe the people that are proposing a test, could they maybe respond to which approach they are taking? Thank you.
Mike, can you answer that at all?
Well, not being on the school committee, I don't know what their thinking is or what their final conclusion is. But, and Katrina can certainly, I mean, both of us been looking at probably different literature, but basically it depends on what they, how much confidence they want to have in their data. Let's put it this way. So, for example, they could very well decide to start out stretching their legs on doing testing at grades K through, I'll make this up, 6, and test n number of individuals per week or twice a week, and keep this going and exercise, as it were, all the moving parts to see if it works. And at the same time, start seeing whether or not the data coming back are meaningful to them. Okay, and there are ways to do this that are not that complex. So there is, in terms of absolute numbers, it's, shall we say, it could range from, it's an open range. It could range from 10, generally because of the logistics of testing. Generally, a panel of 24 is a good number to start off with, because it's a balance between economics and data. And I'll just stop there, because again, the school committee will be going into that because that's part of the process.
Yeah, go ahead, Kevin.
Just John, point 1, 2 masks are better than 1. Point 2, in regards to the metrics on the hospitalizations and the death rate, that's all lagging stuff. So we want to focus on the front line, sort of infection rates and things like that. And then point 3, we'll leave that up to the school committee to decide which way they want to go on testing. And I'm sure tomorrow night, Mike Fontanella and the school committee will lay that out and determine and explain why they're going to choose which method they're going to choose.
Go ahead, Katrina. Thanks, Kevin.
So, John, I just want to clarify, when I said before that I was suggesting people increase the quality of their mask, I wasn't just saying everyone should double mask. It was just look at your mask and see if you can take it up a notch. And it's really an individual choice of whether you choose to or not. So at this point, no one is saying we require everyone to have a KN95 or a surgical mask in any situations, except maybe the doctor office that I walked into and they handed me one, and I put it over my own. So that is a choice. But in terms of testing, the goal of the testing kind of drives how many people you would want to be involved in the testing. And if I'm understanding the legality, like the legal aspects and balancing it with the science aspect, I don't think they can require that everyone test. So it's not a true surveillance where you get everyone every week. But if the higher the proportion of people who opt into testing, the more robust your data will be. And if there is a situation, the quicker it will drive the cases down. So I've seen testing programs that are 50%. I know that Harvard Public Schools started one and they have about 80% participating. And some other schools in Massachusetts, they don't have full 100%, but they have benefits of the testing program happening. So no, it's not a true surveillance where you test everyone every week program that's happening. But these testing programs where you have opt-in still have a lot of value because you get information about cases, and especially if you can look at cases within grade level or those distinct classrooms that get grouped together, and even settings like, is there a classroom that might not have the best ventilation and there are cases arising in there? What's happening during lunch if people are close together and there's a cluster that forms there? So no, I don't think it will ever be 100%, but the more people who participate, the more data and more benefit we will have for data-driven decisions.
Thank you, Katrina. All right, and Dave, anybody else?
I see
Hands
no
up?
more hands. No more hands.
Okay, great. So Kevin, Louise, Gino, will you guys all be with the meeting tomorrow?
Oh, yeah, I will be.
Sure.
I try to be there, and also I hope I get the information that I need to get in Zoom, you know what I mean?
It's on the town website, Gino. Okay, so the next Board of Health meeting will be Wednesday, February 3rd at 7 o'clock. And I don't know if Janet will be back, and I don't know what our agenda will be, if it'll just be a COVID update or if it'll have
Would you say February 3rd, Annie?
every Wednesday, Gino.
All right, every Wednesday, yeah, okay.
February 3rd. Yep.
You.
Anybody want to make a motion to adjourn?
I make a motion to adjourn. Thank you so much for everything.
All right, got a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Kevin Baker,
Kevin Baker, yes.
Gino Fratelloni,
Yes, thank you.
Louise Nichols,
Louise Nichols, yes.
Mike Zeldin.
Mike Selden, yes.
Great. Lisa Flanagan, yes. So have fun at your meeting tomorrow, Mike.
Oh, yes. I'm
Oh.
sure I will.
All right.
I'll report back all the fisticuffs.
Thank you.
Okay.
Enjoy.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Have a good night.
all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, Mike. Bye, Kevin.